I can't wait to graduate. I'm going to get a great job and work my way up the ranks. By the time I'm about 30, I plan to be a manager, maybe even CEO. I'll have a couple of kids, put them through a private school, build a house, buy a yacht, and retire at the age of 65 and go on a round the world trip.
Yeah, I'm so excited to get a great grad job too. I'll work my way up the ranks, and then when I'm about 30, I'll take some time off to have kids. And I might go back to work, but just part-time, so I've got enough time to be a mother. And then when the kids are older, I'll try to get a full-time job, but I'll struggle to find meaningful work that actually matches my qualifications. And then I'll eventually retire with barely enough super to live on.
Hang on, I'm racking up a pretty sizable HECS debt, not to mention investing a lot of time and energy at uni. If this is my future, doesn't this all seem like a bit of a waste? When women don't fulfill their economic potential, it's not just their investment that's wasted. The government invests billions per year in education. Women represent almost 60% of university graduates, yet only 53% of women with bachelor degrees are in full-time employment, compared to 81% of men. Women's overall labour force participation rate is 70% compared to 82% for men, meaning significantly fewer women are engaging with or looking for work. Clearly, the significant investments in female human capital are not being fully realised in the economy. Increasing female labour force participation could combat the negative economic effects of an ageing population and a declining fertility rate. In fact, increasing female labour force participation by just 6% could boost the Australian economy by $25 billion. This would also lead to a more efficient allocation of human capital and more equitable outcomes for women. So, what's stopping us? Australia's national gender pay gap is 15.3%, and based on current progress, gender parity won't be achieved for another 169 years. But what does this mean? The gender pay gap is an explicit indicator of the different ways men and women engage with and are valued within the workforce. There is no single cause of the gender pay gap. In fact, there are a number of factors that contribute to this. These include the different average wages within female versus male-dominated industries, a lack of work-life balance in full-time or higher-paying roles, unconscious bias among managers and employers when hiring and promoting female employees, and traditional gender roles and social norms which view women as the primary carer and men as the income earner. So, let's have a closer look at some of these factors. Despite women dominating certain industries and accounting for 42% of the total workforce, men still dominate leadership and managerial roles. This misrepresentation of women at managerial level is not purely down to time away from work for childbirth and care. This indicates there is a level of gender bias at play when hiring and promoting female employees. These biases may be based on employers' assumptions about how women interact with employment. Statistically, women do tend to work shorter hours and choose part-time positions after having children. These part-time positions tend to be lower paid and can cause highly skilled workers to be placed in positions they are overqualified for. This is a highly inefficient allocation of resources and a waste of investment in education and training. So, why do women work less than men? The social norm of women as the primary caregiver and men as the income earner means women take on a disproportionate share of unpaid domestic duties. Women spend an average of 6 years out of full-time work for birth and ongoing childcare. The subsequent impact on career progression and total earnings has been calculated to contribute to 9% of the gender wage gap. From a rational economic perspective, remaining in full-time paid employment reaps more benefits than taking on unpaid domestic duties. So why do so many women jeopardize their economic prosperity as they follow the path to motherhood?
But women are irrational, that's all there is to that.
Well, he's not wrong. As humans, neither women nor men are rational beings. Introducing behavioral economics, the study of irrational human decision-making. Let's hear from Professor Katie on the topic.
Humans are not rational. Even when we understand the actions required to achieve an end goal, our behaviour is subject to cognitive bias, emotions, and social influences. This is why behavioural economics is such an excellent tool in understanding and reducing the gender pay gap. Yes, women often make the choice to take time off work to raise their children, while men generally prioritise their careers. But how much of this choice is influenced by gender normative roles? How much is policy contributing to these gender roles? And how can we amend this?
Economic policy has a role to play in reversing these traditional gender roles and achieving efficient market allocation by removing the barriers for women in the labour market. So let's take a look at Australia's current policies, specifically the Paid Parental Leave Scheme. In Australia, the birth mother is automatically assumed to be the primary caregiver and is offered up to 18 weeks of paid parental leave at the minimum wage, some of which may be transferred to their partner. On the other hand, if you're not the primary carer, you are eligible for 2 weeks of paid leave. So what does Dr. Dakota have to say about this?
Australia's parental leave scheme does not even consider the possibility of equal parenting responsibilities. Mothers are offered 9 times the paid leave fathers are offered. So, this policy reinforces the traditional gender roles, which discounts women's value in the workplace and men's value as fathers. These policy settings distort the choices women make about the benefits and disadvantages of paid work and having children. It also distorts employers' understandings of how women and men interact with employment. To combat the effects of an ageing population, the government should be encouraging higher labour force participation among women and trying to maintain the fertility rate. But with the current policy settings, these two goals are paradoxical. Career-minded women are discouraged from having children, and women who have children are encouraged to take on caregiving responsibilities rather than paid work. Clearly, policy changes are required to change these gender-based assumptions and improve economic outcomes for women.
In fact, reducing the time women spend out of full-time work from 6 years to 2 years would reduce the gender pay gap by almost 1/3. This is a significant reduction that can be achieved by introducing policy that shifts the burden of childcare to both parents. Looking to the world's top performers in gender equality, Scandinavian countries offer gender-neutral paid parental leave, which correlates with more similar labour force participation rates between genders. So, what exactly does a gender-neutral paid parental leave scheme look like? Across Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, parents are entitled to paid parental leave at 80 to 100% of their previous income. Scandinavian countries offer equal, non-transferable maternity and paternity leave, meaning both parents receive the same benefits, and if one parent does not wish to take the leave available, they forfeit the benefit. It cannot be transferred to the other parent. This take it or leave it strategy results in 90% of fathers taking paternity leave, as it removes any possible incentive to transfer their leave to their partner and return to work. In addition to non-transferable leave, parents are offered shared leave, which may be split between the parents however they choose, allowing families flexibility. The high pay level offered for parental leave demonstrates the government values domestic and childcare responsibilities more similarly to paid employment, which may also change perceptions of the value of traditionally male and female roles. These more equitable parental leave schemes strongly encourage both parents to take on equal parenting responsibilities and have extremely positive impacts on labour force participation. Across Scandinavia, men's labour force participation rates are similar to Australia's, and women's rates are at least 6 percentage points higher. By introducing policy which helps reduce the prevalence of traditional gender roles and expectations, the government may reduce the impact of social influences on women's career decisions, leading to more rational economic decision-making. More equitable parental leave may also influence employers' hiring and promoting decisions. Employers may be less affected by heuristics, which assume women will be less productive at work after having children. If women and men interact more similarly with paid employment and unpaid childcare responsibilities, employers are less likely to base decisions on these gender-based biases, further improving economic outcomes for women. While gender-neutral paid parental leave is effective in Scandinavian countries, how effective would these policy changes be in Australia? The significantly higher pay offered for parental leave in Scandinavian countries plays a large role in incentivising fathers to take paternity leave, and the high levels of taxation in these countries allows governments to pay parental leave at these higher levels. Meanwhile, the current contractionary fiscal policy in Australia is unlikely to lend itself to higher levels of pay for parental leave. This means the effects of an equal and non-transferable parental leave scheme without increasing the pay would be minimal, as families would still be incentivised to have at least one parent return to full-time work. Scandinavian countries also offer heavily subsidised universal childcare, in contrast to Australia's expensive, often unaffordable childcare. Again, this policy goes hand in hand with equal parental leave policies, as it reduces the pressure on either parent to stay at home and undertake unpaid childcare responsibilities. However, subsidised childcare also relies on government expenditure, and with the current contractionary fiscal policy, this is unlikely. So, the Australian government cannot expect just one policy change to be enough to make significant change in the economic outcomes for women. The government must consider all of the barriers for women in the labour force and combine policies which target these barriers to truly break down gender stereotypes which influence women's decisions surrounding employment and childcare. This sort of attitude change takes time and commitment from government, which in turn requires attitude change at the top level, Parliament. Given the difference in gender representation between the Australian Parliament and those in Iceland, Norway, and Sweden, policy change for the economic benefit of women in Australia is likely a relatively distant future.